longer doing windshield time when we're taking listings because we've got the product that people are wanting to buy. One of the ways we get at that, and I won't cover a listing presentation today per se, but is effective communicating. And part of effective communicating is really understanding what it is that sellers are looking for, particularly in a market like we're in today. We know that interest rates are high, but given the fact that we've also known that interest rates have been artificially low for quite some time. So from the COVID years, certainly COVID drove interest rates down. It was necessary for the federal government to make sure that interest rates stayed low so we didn't crash the economy. So many industries were taking a bath and, taking a back seat because nobody was out buying. So people weren't buying durable goods. People weren't out shopping at retail levels. We saw mass amounts of restaurants and things like that imploding as a result of having no customer base. So interest rates were low to accommodate what was actually going on, not only nationally, but globally. So that artificial interest rate gave our customer base a relatively insecure position because they weren't sure what next steps were. So it was necessary for the federal government to keep interest rates low. And that's when you started to see a lot of people buying. Couple that with the fact that people recognized that they could work remotely. We ended up having, a banner year in 2021, one of the best years on record. Hey, Kathy, one of the best years on record. And so now we're moving forward. As we started to adjust out of COVID years, we also started to adjust out of those artificially low interest rates. And those artificially low interest rates is what actually ignited the market. They created a frenzy of people wanting to buy. And that, buying power was at an all-time high, and that caused prices to buy. I mean, one of the core principles that we work from is the principle of supply and demand and the principle of substitution. Not supply and demand is obviously the less supply, the more demand, the more you can charge. And that's kind of where we are right now. With inventory being at an all-time low in some markets less than 2 weeks, it's very difficult for people to, to be the successful bidder on a property that they're looking to purchase. Again, recognizing that the median income as of today, or the median home price as of today, is $404,000. Guys, in my history, there's only been one other time to where you saw the median price being so significantly high. How do we get at getting new customers, or what are some of the tactics that we want to employ and utilize to where we can get new customers? I've mentioned before in previous meetings and such that most of you who got into real estate anywhere between 2010, let's call it, and 2023, let's scale that up a bit. Let's call it 2012 and 2023. Most of you have never seen a down market. And so you're looking at ways to actually get into business right now that will absolutely make sense for you, that will continue to drive your revenue, support your customer base, things like that. Thinking about it as it sits right now, many of you are going to have to adjust away from a buyer-centric business model to more of a seller-specific business model. So I want to talk about that today. But as you know, if you participated in my classes before, I love quotes. I'm a person who affirms every day. I look at motivational messages that continue to drive me forward, and I suggest all of you should do the same. One of the things about effective communication, I love this particular quote: never forget the power of silence. That massively disconcerting pause, which goes on and may induce an opponent to babble and backtrack nervously. So what does that mean exactly? What are we actually saying with something like that? What we're actually saying is sometimes as realtors, we talk too much, and that's because of our own nervousness. We're consumers as well, so we're often uncertain as to what's going on for us. And so we spend a lot of time telling a consumer things that would soothe us, when in fact we should be telling a consumer exactly what's going on. So let's kind of jump into this a bit. So our agenda today is to talk win-win negotiations that work. Many of you may not have worked as listing agents before. So to give you an idea of what it takes to transition from a buyer-centric business to more of a listing or seller-centric business, we'll talk about some win-win strategies. We'll talk about how to prepare successful win-win negotiations, how to negotiate a win-win solution. Are you guys seeing a pattern or a theme here, right? It's always about the win. One thing that's always baffled me, being a realtor for a long period of time, is I never understand realtors when they want to get into adversarial positions, right? Guys, at the end of the day, we're not attorneys. We all have the same common goal in mind. The only difference is you may have a buyer who wants to buy something. I may have a seller who wants to sell something. Our job is to just put the two together to make sure we hash out all the correct term so everybody's happy at the end of the day. That's really the core of a win-win negotiation. But that's also, helping to produce outcomes like effective relationship management. And that's when we get into referral business. Because if you did a solid work and somebody's happy with what you did, more than likely they're going to continue to refer people to you now and in the future. And then understanding the relationship that you actually have with your customer. That's more critical than anything. Oftentimes, customers feel dissatisfied because they don't feel heard. In other words, we think we know what they want, but we really didn't understand what they were sharing with us or asking of us. Okay. So again, a win-win strategy is a integrative win-win negotiation. One party doesn't gain at the other's expense. For example, when one side pursues its goals, it doesn't necessarily mean that the other side won't be able to meet its goals too. And again, as we talk about it, win-win, in my opinion, is 100% the best strategy when we're talking about the real estate industry or in the real estate marketplace, right? It involves everybody in the process. It has three basic steps. Again, you first have to know what's being asked of you. So that's problem identification. What are they really looking for? And am I the best person to solve it? Am I the solution generator? Am I going to be that person who actually has something viable, something that they can rely on? And what's the selection they're going to choose? So when we talk about problem identification, that's probably the most difficult step. Why is that probably the most difficult step? It's primarily because we don't ask enough questions, guys. When we meet someone, our own anxiety comes forward so loudly that we just want to get through whatever it is that we're doing with that person because we feel uncomfortable. We don't want to ask certain questions because it feels invasive, intrusive. So we're trying to move ahead, move forward, and just get to the yes without really understanding the path to the yes. So that's why problem identification is probably the most difficult step when it comes to negotiating, because many of you don't ask enough questions. So you don't really know what's being asked of you, right? You begin with identifying everybody who's going to be involved, what anybody's specific needs are. You have to uncover anything that may be unspoken, so that you know what you're bringing to the table. And in turn, that allows you to present a more effective presentation when you are bringing something to the table. So what are some of the traits of a very successful sales negotiation? What need is driving the negotiator? First of all, who is the negotiator? Are you as the agent the negotiator? Is the seller the negotiator? Is the buyer the negotiator? What's driving the need of the negotiator? What are the fears? In other words, you guys have all heard of FOMO, fear of missing out. Are they feeling like they're going to miss out on something? Are they feeling like they're giving up more only to get less? I'll bet you that last statement is more true than anything in today's market. People feel like at a higher interest rate, they're giving up more in order to get less. And that's disconcerting to many people. But realistically, are they giving up more to get less? I would say no, only based on where housing prices have gotten to. A seller can almost walk into any negotiation and get a very reasonable amount of income based on the lack of inventory. But establishing what is their fear, why are they hesitant to move forward? What are the things that are keeping them from actually putting pen to paper? things like that. What motivates the negotiator to take their current position? And again, it's very important in any transactional dynamic to identify who is the negotiator. Many times the agent feels like it's them only because they're the ones controlling the pen. But the truth of it is, it's probably your client who's doing the negotiating because they're telling you what to say, what they will or will not do, things like that. And part of our job to become a successful negotiator is understanding why they will or will not do that and taking control of that so that you can present your client's case, whether it's a buyer or seller, in the most effective light and get the best outcome. Okay. Another part of problem identification is identifying the outcome, managing the expectation. What do people really want to see at the close of this thing? Is it a very simple transaction, merely I bought this house that I wanted and I sold this house that I didn't want anymore? Or is it more complex than that? I've found over the years that most negotiations or most real estate transactions are far more than just the transactional side. There's a large emotional component. And how do we address that in a win-win dynamic, right? Emotions are a very difficult thing to manage for both ourselves and when we're dealing with people outside of ourselves. Some of you are very sympathetic people. Some of you are empathic people, and deciding where you sit on that side of the fence. Sympathetic people sometimes leave lots of money on the table because they tend to feel more like that person than actually being a strong negotiator. Empathy is, I get where you're at, but we need to move forward, and these are the reasons why. Many of you are familiar with your EQ or your emotional intelligence. What makes a strong negotiator is also a person who keeps their own emotions in check so that things don't become out of balance when a difficult situation is presented to you. Okay. Are there precedents in this negotiation that you should be aware of? Again, you should always be the negotiator. I know many of you, I've heard this statement from agents quite often, which is, well, my client said, or my seller said, or my buyer said. That automatically triggers for me that you're probably not in control of where the negotiation is headed, which means you're probably not in control of your customer. We know that customers act irrationally because while they may say they want something, they're usually so emotionally involved in the process that they're really not sure what it is that they want. Okay. Does a relationship already exist? In other words, is there something else with someone else that's going on that could inhibit or stall your negotiation? And, is that going to impact any future negotiation? Are there existing issues that may surface during the negotiation? Again, I said, one of the things I know that we fail to do, and it's not deliberate, it's just kind of a condition of how we've learned a process, is we fail to ask lots of questions. Again, asking questions, particularly in the manner in which we ask questions, feels intrusive. It feels invasive. We're like, man, I don't want this. Geez, I wouldn't want that for me. Why would I do that for someone else? I will say part of the reason that many of us feel that way is because A, we've had bad sales experiences and we're trying to avoid those bad sales experiences. And B, we don't have enough script and dialogue sophistication to walk through that. I guarantee that each and every one of you have had a bad sales experience, but you've also had a great sales experience. And I'll give you a good example. Let's say you drove to the mall. I know malls don't really exist anymore, but let's say you drove to your favorite store and you got out of the car, you found a parking spot, you got out of the car, you walked into your favorite store. The first thing the salesperson says is what? Hi, can I help you? That's already the start of a bad sales experience because our next response is always, and I don't even have to say it, I can hear you all saying it, which is, no, thank you, just looking. That's almost all of our responses all the time because that's the start of a bad sales experience. It's the start of poor relationship building because clearly you've taken the effort to shower, get on the road, drive around endlessly to find a great parking spot, go into a store only to say, I'm just looking. That's clearly a salesperson who's not in touch with the person they're trying to connect with. When I say you've had a great sales experience, you've also had the same effect, same events to where you walk into the store and then the person says, "Hi, welcome to our store. Feel free to look around. I'm here if you need me." Now that starts a relationship, right? It's a no pressure moment. It's a level to where we feel like we can shop in peace, right? We love to buy, but we hate to be sold. So we feel like we can navigate through the store, but that salesperson's also keeping an eye on you. And you may hold up a blouse or a shirt next to you, and that salesperson says, "Hey, that looks great on you. We also have that same thing in blue or red or green or whatever." And you end up leaving buying more than you planned to buy because of such a great sales experience. That's what's going on in a very difficult market. We let our own emotions control how we reach out, how we prospect or fail to prospect. We let everything that affects a general consumer effect, but that's already the start of a bad sales experience. We tend to function from a desperate position at that point, which is as we start to prospect, are you looking to buy or sell? Are you looking to buy or sell? Which only makes it about you, right? And just like that first sales experience, if it's about you, then it's a sale that probably won't happen. If it's an open again, who holds the power in the negotiation? Is it you? Is it the seller? Is it the buyer? Is it the buyer and the seller? Is it the other agent? Understanding that up front. Sometimes we wrestle for control. And when we wrestle for control, we also have to adjust our emotions. We start to get very emotional or confrontational when we feel like we're being challenged or confronted. Okay. Are there resource control issues? In other words, you may say, "I can do this thing," but are you limited by budget? Are you limited by the seller's ability to actually perform on these things? Let's take a cluttered house, for instance. The seller may not have funds to put their items into either storage or move it to their replacement home because they may not have identified their replacement home yet or not have the funds to do it, right? So you're evaluating so many different things. And these are the steps that we don't often think about when we try and get in a relationship with our customer base. We don't think about all these things because a negotiation is a complex process. Getting a listing, which is really just saying, "I'm the person who can market your home to be sold," that's a complex process. It's more than just knocking on a door and somebody signs a piece of paper. It's you evaluating the human relationship that's going to drive this marketing proposition forward. If you can't reach an agreement, who has the most to lose? Is it the seller? Is it the buyer? These are all things that you guys want to consider. What's your BATNA? A BATNA's best alternative to a negotiated agreement. In other words, if the terms that are on the table right now can't be fulfilled, what's the next best thing that can happen to where it still creates a win-win outcome? Okay. As you begin to uncover each party's needs and interests, you can put together a clear and simple problem statement that everyone agrees to and accepts. That's always the best way to go, guys. If everybody said yes to everything that we presented, man, we'd have a great life. But the truth is, people have other ideas, and it's a give and take. Sometimes it's more give than take. Sometimes it's more take than give. But again, if a win-win dynamic can be achieved, that's the best way to go. So some problem statement tips. One is make sure everything's mutually acceptable. The problem statement should reflect all parties' interest, right? That's what's called a mutual agreement, right? Or a meeting of the minds. Offer and acceptance. There are many ways to state that, but that's what that's called. That's why offers get accepted. There was a meeting of the minds. It stated everybody's general interest and needs. I want to reduce complaints. It would be an example, or I want to improve quality. Everybody wins in something like that. Make it as neutral as possible. A win-win is a very neutral process, right? It keeps the scales balanced. To personalize that definition, take out any evaluative or judgment terms. For example, we want the production department to improve their quality standards, attacks the production department and lays blame. We do that with our sellers and buyers as well. Well, the seller's not doing this, or they won't budge, and we're going to make them do these things, or the buyer won't give and they won't come up with money, right? We make these statements all the time, which automatically set our customer base up for failure for a win-win dynamic, because now we're back to that adversarial position between agents that I don't understand. In the entire time I've been in this business, I've never understood it. Again, everybody wants to win and we can all win. It's just a matter of what are the terms on the table that we can all agree to. State the problem as a goal. Decide what you want to achieve and how. If the goal was to reduce customer complaints to 3%, it's a more effective problem statement than minimizing customer complaints. Same with a buyer or seller. I need to be here, in time for my kids to start school, versus, I need to find a home that my family will be comfortable with and we can continue to grow, thrive, and prosper. And that goes back to really understanding and asking more questions as to what's motivating them to do whatever. Again, we're trying to get you focused on a more seller-centric marketplace so that inventory can increase. And right now with low inventory, if you're solely working with buyers, it's very difficult for you to get your buyer into an effective position based on what market standards are right now, right? The cost of money is high. We all know that. The cost of goods and services have increased as well. We're in the summer months right now, so gas is high. There's a lot of things that cause a consumer consternation, right? There's a lot of money coming out of their pocket, and to get a buyer motivated to buy is difficult, but it can be done. But to get a seller motivated right now to sell, knowing that inventory is low, that feels like walking up Mount Everest without oxygen and, the proper layer of clothing to keep you insulated from the coolness, right? Or the cold, the freezing cold. So really kind of look at these things. These are not insurmountable odds. I started off by saying, if you've been in the business just basically over the last 10 years or so, you've never really witnessed a down market. And so some of this is tough skin logic. I can't think of a better way to state that. But what I simply mean by that is, dealing or working through your own emotions so that you're not projecting what you're feeling internally onto the seller, and allowing the seller and giving the seller enough information, hiccups, giving the seller enough information to make an informed decision. Okay. And again, we are the holders of that information currency. If you think of information like it's money, like it's currency, we dole that out very carefully. We just don't throw our money around. But sellers are getting information from so many different resources. It's very difficult for a seller to actually make an informed decision because they're hearing from television, they're hearing from YouTube, they're hearing from news reports, they're hearing from family, they're hearing from everywhere, about the doom and gloom in the market and why it might not be a good time to sell, and, what they could face, and low inventory, even though prices are high, right? They're hearing all this stuff. And your job, truthfully, is to help to put all that noise together in a muffled bucket so that now they can really isolate what it is that they're wanting to do and how you're going to be the person to help them accomplish what that looks like. Okay. All right, so we talked about problem identification, and we said there are three parts to this. How do we generate solutions, right? That's a creative phrase, of integrative negotiation, is really understanding. We've identified all the problems. We've laid it out. These are all the things that we're looking at. But how do we get at what we're really trying to get at, which is either to get the seller to sell, right? We already know what to do with buyers, so I'm going to focus on sellers primarily. Is we want to reframe that win-win. Again, my job, Mr. and Mrs. Seller, is to find a buyer who's ready, willing, and able to buy your property today. I understand that you don't have a replacement home, which allows me an opportunity to work right now while we pursue putting your home on the market, is to find you your next home as well. Okay. So you want to reframe that. Why does the seller want to sell? I want to sell because I want to get the most money out of it. Right now, there's a lot of money flowing in and out of the market. I want to take advantage of that. There's more equity in my home now than ever. How do I embrace that? How do I tackle that? That's a great motivator right now. So we expand the pie. And many conflicts center around shortage of resources. Resources, in our cases, we know that there are fewer and fewer homes for sale right now, historically low. Markets are suffering because there's so little inventory on the market right now. So the simplest way is to find more resources. Again, part of what we do to find resources, right? Many of you who are working with buyers know this all too well, which is you spend the day trolling through the MLS, hoping to see something new, to be the first person so that your buyer can absolutely pull the trigger and everybody has success. That's what we're doing right now in our buyer-centric businesses. In expanding the pie in a more seller-centric marketplace is to actually go and do the hard thing, which is, hello, Mr. and Mrs. Seller. My name is D. Wilmore. The reason I'm here is, right, which is door knocking, or hello, potential Mr. and Mrs. Seller. My name is so-and-so. This is what I'm wanting to do. I'm wanting to help you to understand your equity position in today's market. When can you and I get together to just have a discussion, right? I've never been a fan of the statement that many realtors use, and I know this is how we all learned it. It's a direct statement. It worked when real estate was a very proprietary business, meaning the internet didn't exist, which is, hi, Mr. and Mrs. Seller, my name's D. Wilmore. Are you ready to buy or sell your house? That kind of thing. Or that was our approach to clients. Very direct, very hammer blunted, no relationship development, none of the above. I've said this before, which is if you met a person, a human being that you were interested in, that you wanted to have a relationship with, would you walk up to that person and say, hey, fellow human being, I'd really like to get with you so we can do the thing, whatever the thing is, right? That person may look at you like you were absolutely crazy, like, wow, you're just going to walk up to me and ask me for that thing, whatever that thing is? No, we do a ritualistic behavior called dating, right? What we do is we say, hey, would you like to get coffee? Can we have a lunch? Can we have a dinner? Can we have whatever, right? And we want to get to know the person. In other words, we look to develop what that relationship dynamic's going to look like. And then after we've spent time and are comfortable with that person, we may then ask for the thing, whatever that thing may be. That's kind of what we don't do with sellers, or we don't do with buyers. Buyers, again, I'm not going to talk too much about buyers or focus on buyers, but certainly with sellers. Mr. and Mrs. Seller, are you looking to sell your home? I don't have a relationship with you. Blunt hammer. No, right? There's no build up. There's no warm up. I'm just asking for the thing. Wrong approach. A better approach is, how do I develop a relationship? Some of that is recognizing they may not be ready to do the thing right now, but they may be open for conversation to discuss why the thing may be appealing, right? So that's how we look at expanding the pie. When we talk about reframing the win-win, there's something called log rolling. Log rolling is where both sides trade off issues. So in that win-win dynamic, right? And there's several different win-wins that exist in just one simple transaction. There's the win-win of you agreeing to do a certain thing for your seller and your seller agreeing to do a certain thing for you. And that is, Mr. and Mrs. Seller, they're going to pay us a certain amount of money to do the thing, and we commit to being able to get the property off for the most money with the least inconvenience in the shortest amount of time possible, right? That's that log rolling thing. We're trading off. That's a win-win. They said they're going to give us X amount of dollars. We're happy with that. We said we're going to get it off the market quickly. We said we're going to find the best buyer for the least inconvenience, and everybody's going to be happy. That's log rolling, okay? Log rolling often happens by trial and error as the parties experiment with various offers and conditions and such. We do that a lot, especially in a listing presentation or a marketing presentation. Mr. and Mrs. Seller, if I could do this, would you? That's what's called a conditional close. If I can do this thing, would you agree to do this thing? Can we move forward, right? Again, using a lot of conditional closes are that thing that help us to get to the win-win. It reframes that win-win dynamic. Are we able to clearly define what those trades mean and the impact of what those trades would have? Or does it denigrate one's value through the process of that transaction? And again, if your goal every time you go in is to focus on the win-win dynamic, you will always have a positive outcome. I know always is a very absolute statement, but let's just say more often than not. How about that? Okay. And then defining what issues are of higher or lower value. So what does that mean? What's the most important to a seller? Sometimes it's not about money, right? I've seen agents just continue to bash a seller in the head about, but I'm going to get you the most money, most money, most money. Sometimes it's not about that. If someone raised a family in a neighborhood and they're close with neighbors and things like that, that's a sense of community. That's where they've reared their children. There's an emotional connection. They also feel for their neighbors and the surrounding, and they want to have someone continue that tradition or move into that neighborhood that's very familial to where it continues to promote that sense of community. That's not about money. That's about, are you the right person to fit in with the community that I'm getting ready to leave, right? So, what's of higher, lower value? That's why, again, drawing back, sounding like a broken record, to asking lots and lots and lots of questions. Lots and lots of questions. Mr. and Mrs. Seller, if you were to sell your home today, where would you like to be? Is money of an issue for you, in terms of buying your replacement home? You can start to ask leading questions so that now you're starting to get some ideas of what's truly important to the seller and why they're selling, okay? What issues are likely to be of higher, lower value to a buyer? So we know that buying behavior and selling behavior are different, right? A buyer is looking to see what they can keep in their pocket. A seller is looking to see what they can put in their pocket. Two very different events for the same outcome, right? Both are wanting to make money or keep money, so to speak, but their motivations are different. So what's going to affect the buyer in this case? Because again, we're focused on seller. Are there issues that are of priority for you as the negotiator that may not be a priority for them? Again, we get very eager in our negotiations styles as agents because it may have been a while since you had your last transaction, right? And we're fans of putting food in the belly, keeping lights on, all those kinds of things, making sure our kids are clothed and we've got gas in our vehicles. And so sometimes we have a desperate approach when it comes to a negotiation process. And when we're desperate, people smell desperation. It's, permeates through the skin. It's registered by your body language and in your eyes and in the posture and the words that you use. People feel the desperation. And so they're less likely to give you a positive or favorable outcome because they know it's not about them and it's only about you, right? And that's never a win-win. Even if you manage to get the listing presentation or the marketing presentation, it's at what cost? I've had recently agents talk to me about they just got a listing, but they only got 0.5% or they got 1%. And how do they break that up with the other party? Guys, I don't believe in the adage of, some money is better than no money. I think that's a myth. I think that's a misnomer. Part of the reason why we don't pursue listings in a very aggressive manner on a daily, weekly, monthly is because when you're looking to be a listing agent primarily, you have to demonstrate your value proposition. Why is somebody going to choose you over someone else, right? There are plenty of people in the markets that you serve that have done this longer, that have had more success than you, that have a very powerful presentation that may be different from yours, that maybe understand the market better than you. Why would they choose you over them? So then we start to do all that self-doubt because these are questions that cycle through our brain. Well, I've only been in the business 3 years, 5 years, 7 years. I've never actually taken a listing, or I've only done 5 listings in my entire career, or whatever it is. And all that self-doubt does not allow you to promote your value proposition. And particularly if you don't understand your value proposition. What do I mean when I say value proposition? In other words, what are you actually bringing to the table? Agents say things like, Mr. and Mrs. Seller, I'm going to work hard for you. Guys, working hard for you is your job, right? That's what you do. Of course, you're going to work hard. That's your job. More specifically, hopefully, you're going to work smart. But, to say I'm going to work hard, that's nothing. Yeah, I'm going to make sure I communicate with you. Well, we're starting to get at it. But again, those are basic things that we should be doing anyway. So if you haven't defined or outlined what your value proposition is, or understand what you bring to the table based on your business model and your business plan, I highly suggest, as we move through these last 2 quarters of 2023, that you spend some time, and I mean really sit down and spend some time and write out what you feel that you bring to the table. Do a free-floating exercise to where you just start to write. It doesn't have to be in any particular format or any order. Just write down all the good things about you that you do as a realtor, or why you got into this business, or who you are as a person. Write all that out. And then you can start to really shape and form it like clay into a value proposition. I do these things well, and I know that's appealing to someone. I do these things well, and I know that's appealing to someone. And I know it relates to this industry. And this is how I can win every time, or help my client vis-a-vis the seller win every time. So guys, if you haven't done that, start to think about doing that. Your value proposition is everything, okay? That's how sellers actually choose us. It's not always about the most experience. It's not always about the people who we sit on their face all the time, and that's the person on the bus bench, right? It's not about those people that we see on our shopping carts, or the the supermarket things, or the mailers or the flyers that come in. They choose you for personality. That's why it's important for you to develop that relationship, because it's the personality coupled with some experience that allows the seller to feel comfortable that you're the right person to help them get to the thing. Okay. If they've got issues, is it a singular issue, or is it something, if it's complex, can it be unbundled to where you can address each issue separate of the main thing, right? Because sometimes people will bundle issues together. In other words, got to find kids school, or got to find a replacement home for myself, or got to get the most money, or want to get the right neighborhood mix, all these things. They'll bundle them all in together, and we think it's just a singular issue until we start the negotiation. Then all of a sudden we feel it getting tighter, and that's because the bundle hasn't been unbundled. We don't know the individual problems that's collectively called the bundle. Okay. So that's when we start to log roll. Is it an inexpensive process for you to untangle the things that they're having concern with? Again, we as agents, especially in a marketing or listing presentation, we automatically go for the money. We think, all right, there's this bundled issue. I'm not asking the right questions. I'm trying to get to this. I really want to get to my end finish line, which is their signature on my page. And we start to talk money all the time. Mr. and Mrs. Seller, if you do this thing with me today, I'll discount my price by 2 points, 3 points, 4 points, which are points are percentages, right? And, if we're drawing from what we customarily use, which is a 5 or 6% model, giving away 2%, that's a lot. And in order to entice a buyer's agent, typically we're giving them the bulk of that 2% using the same logic of some money's better than no money. And again, that's true when we're coming from a position of scarcity, right? When we're feeling broke, or we're feeling like our coffers aren't very full, sure, that nickel, that dime feels good, but it's a short-lived proposition, right? And it doesn't give us the strength and the encouragement to move to another process, because we're doing a lot of work for little money, okay? Again, as we talk about that solution generation, the object is to create a list of solutions that solve the problem. There may not be just one thing that can tackle that, right? It may be a series of things. When we talk about things that are away from compensation, in other words, as I said, we give up money a lot in listing transactions, which I believe is always the wrong thing. And I'll tell you why. Let me ask you this. When you go to your physician, either for a regular checkup or because you've got an ailment, my shoulder hurts, my hip hurts, my knee hurts, I got a headache, whatever, and you start talking with your doctor and they say, okay, this is the problem, this is what it's going to be. Do you say, well, doc, I was the one who identified the pain in my head, so I should get a discount? Does that ever work for any of you? It's never worked for me. I've never even tried it, right? I'm just thankful that I got with someone who could solve whatever ailment I had, right? My headache's gone. My elbow doesn't hurt anymore. At least I got a path to a solution to where I can start to feel whole again. So, again, rather than go for the money, we can look at non-specific compensation solutions. That's another way we can resolve conflict. And again, we start to get very uncomfortable the minute we have to start to negotiate money, because money is very personal to all of us, right? We don't just walk down the street and tell people how much we make, how much we have or we don't have. We kind of keep money issues very close to the vest, very close to our hearts, because we feel very vested in what we do to make money, and whether we have it or not, we don't always want people to know what our financial positions are. Okay, so start to look at non-specific compensation solutions. In other words, is it always about me paying off money, or are there other things? Mr. and Mrs. Seller, if you work with me today, we can do these things. I can help you to find storage, or I'll be the person to coordinate this project by finding you a cleaner, helping you to declutter, all these things. While your time is valuable, offering to provide services in addition to the marketing presentation just helps you to exercise your value. And again, when I'm talking about value proposition, it's not always that I'm the best, and so I charge the best. It's all the things that make the process easier. When you think about a concierge experience, we spend many times making our clients do work. So I love to, I travel a bit. I'm a big person. I really like comfort when I travel. I travel for work, I'll travel for pleasure, but I like to be comfortable when I'm on the road, when I'm away from my house. And, I'm a person who likes things taken care of, whether it's business or personal. I want to be able to come back to my hotel and have everything taken care of. I don't want to have to worry about, did I get this, or do I have to do these things? I pretty much want it taken care of. That's a 4 or 5 star experience, right? But why do we do a 4 or 5 star experience? Because we know that things get taken care of. Many of us, when we talk about our value proposition, we don't provide a 4 or 5 star experience at all. We don't even barely provide a 3 star experience, because we feel that there's an expense to that type of behavior. But part of the reason they hire us is because they don't want to have to do work. They hired you for your skill and for your expertise. And part of that skill and expertise is to not making them work. They may already have a full-time job. As a matter of fact, that's a statement I use when I go on listing presentations. When the seller offers to do things, I will tell them right off the bat, Mr. and Mrs. Seller, I'm sure you already have a full-time job. Why would you want to take on something else? That's what I do. Let me take care of that. You don't have to worry. I'll communicate with you on a regular basis so that you feel comfortable in moving and transitioning to your next life event. That's a 4 or 5 star experience. And that actually starts to speak to your value proposition, because you're taking care of things in a real-time fashion without having to give up monies. As a matter of fact, you're doing the opposite. You're doing things that support your fee, whatever it is that you're charging. Okay. So that's a non-specific compensation. Again, when we're effective, the other parties understand, man, I'm paying for this. Like, I'm trying to think of a hotel or a motel. Motel 6. Motel 6 is a bare bones kind of a hospitality experience, right? They don't provide much other than a room, I'm sure, right? And Motel 6s are usually less expensive than a 3, 4, 5 star experience. But that 3, 4, 5 star experience, we're paying more because there's the concept or the feeling that we're getting so much more, from cleanliness to service, right? We feel like we're getting so much more by you providing that extra layer of service as you're thinking about going and prospecting for these types of business opportunities. Think about that from a value perspective, okay? You're helping them And from a cost cutting approach, you are actually saving them money overall, and you're actually getting more in your pocket than having them do certain things. Okay, cost cutting allows one to achieve its objectives and minimize the cost of the seller. So again, if you and part of it is illusory, right? It feels like it really is when it isn't. And what I mean by that is the seller may not have to pay for some of these products or services until the back end. You're simply the person arranging for these things to happen. I'm not suggesting that you're paying these things out of your pocket. I'm suggesting that you be the coordinator. You're the quarterback. You're aligning everybody to get to the end goal. But at the end, most of the payment's going to come from the seller's proceeds. And I guarantee the seller will be happy, because the truth of it is you didn't make them work. You gave them peace of mind. You allowed them to proceed through a transaction without feeling stressed and overwhelmed. And we all know, even when we've gone through a real estate experience ourselves, there's a lot of stress that's involved. There's a lot of overwhelmedness that everybody feels. So that's a way of articulating your value proposition as well. And then what's called bridging is when you're looking at new options so that everybody feels comfortable and everybody feels safe. Again, you're going to have multiple negotiations throughout any one given real estate transaction. That negotiation starts right off the bat with, hey, can I come over so we can even talk about doing business together, right? And then there's the negotiation of, once you're there, can we agree on these terms so we can do business together? And then there's the negotiation of, the best way to market it so that we can get somebody to where we can get into a negotiation process with them, and then the negotiation with them, and finally the negotiation to close. So there are multiple negotiations, and these things work for all of those things. Okay. Finally, we talk about solution selection. How are we going to evaluate? And that's kind of what, I'm walking us towards is, what are the things that we're going to employ in order to create this win-win dynamic, to really articulate our value proposition, to let them know that you are the person to help them get to the thing, right? That's, developing standards that is consistent with fair and reasonable. If once both parties start to debate, they determine what's important, what's not important, right? These are all solution-oriented or solution selective kinds of things. So now we get into the negotiation of the deal, which is focusing on the ultimate outcome. We know that the win-win is the most crucial thing. Everybody's got to be happy in a real estate transaction. Again, we are not divorce attorneys. We're not legal entities in any way. Other than that, we're people who have a fiduciary capacity with the people we represent. And a fiduciary capacity is a relationship of trust. That's what we're always trying to develop, right? It's critical to outline the things that must exist, outlining the must-haves, outlining the things that are going to absolutely kill the deal. If this happens, there's no way I can move forward, right? Get those things out up front. That's where it comes into asking all those questions that we've been talking about. Make sure that everybody's goal aligns right as the negotiation or before the negotiation begins. Make sure we're clearly on the same page. When working with a seller, if you're not aligned with the seller, right? Just recently, earlier today, I dealt with an agent who was frustrated because he and the seller aren't aligned, and it's based on price. The seller's thinking, I want to do this. He's thinking, I want to do this. The reality is, at the end of the day, it's the seller's house. And the seller can ask for whatever the heck they want to ask for. But you, as the person who holds the information currency, can actually show the seller and help them make an informed decision by providing real-time data that says, I'd love to get you $10 million for this house too. That's how I feed my family. But the reality is this is what the market is doing. These 6 homes that look just like yours only sold for X, right? What would you like me to do? Do you want your home to be a market reject? In other words, customers will come by and look and move away because they can find, under the principle of substitution, something that's equal without having to pay more money? Or do you want to be the highest priced home on the market that sits and never sells, right? That's aligning. It may sound confrontational, but clearly they're not aligned, and it's important to get aligned before the negotiation even starts. Okay. Don't be afraid to be specific and direct, which is what I just shared with you. If you're feeling like, if you're functioning from scarcity and you feel like the seller's going to walk away from you if you tell them no, or if you give them real data, you're probably not going to be in a win-win scenario. You're going to be in a win neutral or a win-lose scenario. Okay. Again, start your negotiation from a top-down position. What does that mean? That means ask for what you want. Already state what your position is. If you charge 6%, stick with 6%, right? Don't start with, I normally charge 6%, but if you sign with me today, I'll take 4, because the minute they hear 4, that's all they're going to take is 4, right? Yeah, well, you said 4. You already started in a win-lose position or a lose-win position. So state what you want, right? People aren't afraid. And especially if your value proposition is strong, you're giving that concierge experience, which is a 4 or 5-star experience. You're not making them work. That supports all day long why you may charge 4, 5, 6, 7%, whatever it is that you charge. Okay. So start from a top-down position. It's very important to remember what your negotiation for, or it's not going to be successful. Sometimes you got to prepare for tough negotiations. And again, negotiation starts from what's called fear energy, right? We need to channel our fear energy to where it gets to where we can be successful on the outcome. So that's knowing where you want to be or what the outcome needs to look like, and understanding and aligning with what your customer wants to see as an outcome. And that's not very difficult, but sometimes it can feel that way. The seller may be stuck on a particular thing. By asking lots of questions, it might be able to drive the seller off that thing. There's a function called away from pain and towards pleasure that I use all the time. Everybody has something in their life that they love, but it's painful. The house that I'm in right now, part of the reason I moved away from my old house is we had to redo a bathroom. There were a couple of things. The house was great, but it wasn't the size we wanted. There were some remodeling things that we needed to do to make it more functional for what our needs were, those kinds of things. And it made more sense to buy something else that had those things already. It was more cost effective for that matter. That's away from pain. I love this thing, but man, if you can get me to dream about this new thing that already has these things together, let's go with that. Away from pain towards pleasure. That's a good starting point in a negotiation. Mr. and Mrs. Seller, that's what we ask. Why are you moving, right? If you could dream real big, Mr. and Mrs. Seller, what would that new house look like? Money given, no object. Now you got them dreaming towards that new thing. And what would you expect to pay for that new thing? Away from pain towards pleasure. That helps to smooth the rough spots in a more difficult negotiation. Can't stress it enough. You've heard it a million times. Be prepared. Come prepared. Don't leave things off. Oh, I don't have that information. I'll get it for you and call you back. Right off the bat, if you're showing that you don't have the currency, in other words, the intellectual spend for those to feel trusted, for them to trust you, then more than likely your negotiation is not going to be successful. Okay. And I know we've only got a couple of minutes, but as you plan your strategy, don't be afraid of the no. Again, that's that fear energy that we convert, right? So often the reason why we're afraid of the no is emotionally we connect that as rejection. That's why we don't prospect, by the way, is because we're connecting these things to ourselves internally, and we're feeling like I don't have the energy to go out and be rejected 60 times today. Okay. So don't be afraid of the no. In our business, the no is going to happen, right? You're going to get more no's than yeses. That's why they call us salespeople. Establish your best alternative to a negotiated agreement in advance. Identify the things that seemingly don't matter, called intangibles, right? Are all the stakeholders at the table? Are all the people, the decision makers, the ones there so that the negotiation doesn't have to resume at a later time or potentially stall or void as a result of not everybody being there? Can't stress enough, ask lots of questions. Create a natural partnership. Again, a win-win is a natural partnership design all by itself, because I'm not doing this just or solely in favor of me. I'm doing this for your benefit as well, and I've got your best interest at heart, okay? Employ respect frequently, right? Negotiations don't have to be disrespectful. Disrespectful comes when our emotional intelligence is not in check and we start to take the negotiation on a personal level, and then everybody gets combative, okay? Always exercise good judgment. I know I'm saying the things that you all know, But these are the things, if we think about them daily, if we practice these things daily, they're going to naturally insinuate themselves into your marketing and listing presentations. All right. I know I rushed to that last part real quick, but that was that common sense section. It takes us right to the 3 o'clock hour almost. We're a minute in. I will just say this, as always, I'm glad for you guys' participation. Thank you for taking time to attend this session with me. Certainly, if you have any questions going forward, feel free to reach out to me, or feel free to reach out to anybody in the organization that you feel can help you get there. If you're not clear as to what next steps need to look like to get you to be presentation ready into that win-win dynamic, definitely let's get some time to talk. Have a great day, everybody. Look forward to seeing you next session.